All right, good afternoon. Thank you for attending today. Appreciate it. My name is Bill Fritz, and you are attending the Diary of a CTO. A fun opportunity, quite frankly, to just discuss topics amongst friends and really just talk a little bit about what reality is in these areas when we're talking about these topics. So, again, thank you for joining. Have the privilege this afternoon of having Mike Doherty on the call. And our topic again is budget today. Mike, as is already called out, has one of the longest titles in the world. So again, Assistant Superintendent, Innovation, Technology, and Communications at Chagrin Falls Exempted Village School District. Thank you, Mike, for a few minutes today. It's going to be fun. Please, folks on the call, use the chat. You're more than welcome to come off microphone as well and ask questions. That's part of our conversation. I have a few slides. Really don't want to really lean in so much to the slides, but they're there for Mike and I to kind of just share with you topics and ideas we're going to go to. So, Mike, we're going to get into this. Again, I appreciate what you've been doing. I just want to say a few things before we lean in. Mike, Ben, I did a jump into your LinkedIn this morning just to kind of take a look at your background and where you've
Oh
been.
my gosh. Okay.
What I want to say is just ideas around where Mike has come from, and I appreciate your work and what you've been doing, Mike. I remember us banging around Ohio Coast and let's get this thing started and running all over the place. And I want to just say thank you for where you are today in your role. I mean, thank you for being assistant superintendent and being a technology innovator in that space of 18 years. You've been a lot of years at Chagrin. You've been a network admin, director of technology. So kudos to you. But let's lean in and have some fun today and talk a little bit about budget. So what we want to do with folks today is just kind of talk about these four areas. We call it, are you prepared for a budget? Create and share a vision, stretch it, the IT budget, and how does it really work? So again, conversation this morning. So Mike, you and I kind of in preparation for this event, we kind of talked a little bit about, are you really prepared? And you had some really cool ideas around what's that look like and such. So I'll kind of lean in and say, and if you wanted to introduce yourself or talk that, but let's just kind of jump right in.
Sure. Yeah. Good afternoon, everybody. Mike Doherty. I'm not going to repeat that long title. But yeah, this is year 23 for me. As Bill mentioned, I have served in a lot of different roles, which I think when we have these conversations really, really helps me because I have been, the desktop technician. I have done the technical side of network administration. I used to develop websites and applications. And ultimately ended up in kind of the CTO role. This is my first year as the assistant superintendent here in Chagrin, but I'm still in charge of technology and I'm still doing all of those things. So really, when Bill and I were talking the other day, when we talk about what's your plan, I feel like it's really difficult to have the budget conversation if you don't have a plan for where you're going in the next. I used to say 5 years. I feel like it's 3 because
Yeah.
technology changes so quickly. But I feel like you need that plan. You need to have a 3-year tech plan that's kind of guiding where you're going to go. When you meet with your treasurer or your superintendent or whoever it is that helps you identify your budget, just having all of those things laid out. Like, don't forget in 26, 27, we're going to have to start replacing staff laptops. Don't forget that I'm going to date myself here a little bit, but don't forget E-rate funding for VoIP runs out in whatever that was, 2019-20. So our costs are going to go up. So having that roadmap, I think, is super, super, super important. The other thing that I put on here that I think is so valuable is this whole idea of a needs assessment. So, seeing some of the people in chat, I know some of you have gone through the CTO coursework with me, but the whole idea behind a needs assessment is making sure that you have the data and the information to back up what you believe to be true. So when Bill and I were talking the other day, you know your district, right? You've been in your role for, ideally you've been in your role for a while. You know when laptop needs to be replaced, or servers need to be replaced, or things like that. But it's so valuable to go through a needs assessment where you're asking the right questions of the right people, to have that data to back it up. So you're going to the superintendent saying, "Hey, I know that we're going to need to replace those laptops, not just because they're 5 years old, but look, we did a survey with our people, and one of the biggest complaints is their laptop or whatever it is can't handle what we're asking it to do." So that's kind of what I was going with there, Bill.
Yeah. And Mike, what I did when I was at Sycamore too, and I didn't know about it until I really just started learning more about it from other CTOs around the country. I put together a 5 year. Funny you talk about how far out do you plan, but I put together a 5 year forecast. I kind of mimicked what my treasurer has always needed to do at the district. So I created this 5 year forecast that was a spreadsheet of all these years, and then historically it grew to 10 years because you've been there long enough. You do see all that, and you can go back and see all the work you've done and all the work you're about to do, and you share that with people. And I think that's very helpful. And what you're talking about is that needs assessment of tracking, and we're going to talk about this later to this morning, is the general fund versus the capital improvement fund, if you even
Sure.
have the ability to do that and see that. And I think that provides a real help with your treasurer. They recognize your value as well. I'm always about selling the CTO, selling yourself, and making sure people understand how important your role is in the district. And even having that plan leans into that even more.
Well,
Something we Go ahead, Mike.
just to your point about having that plan, especially as you go year after year, is being able to show people, hey, you know what, we were 100% accurate with needing to do X, Y, and Z, but here's why we only do 3 years, because this happened and it completely shifted where we were going. But having that plan, being able to show teachers, parents, the board, anybody really, that like, I have a direction that I'm going with the district and it aligns with the district goals. And then being able to historically look back and say, boom, 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 this is exactly what we said we were going to do. And we did it. I think it's super helpful.
Yeah, no, great. And what I've got on our slides here this afternoon is you're going to notice we talked a little bit about that needs assessment. You know, we used to have the tech planning tool, if you remember, or if I'm dating
Oh
myself,
yeah.
if I've been in Ohio long enough, and it's no longer a thing. But that really needs to happen for us still, somewhere, some shape along. You need to be doing that, whether it's in spreadsheets or having that needs assessment. Needs assessment, Mike. Also, what does that look like at the building level? Does that look like you talking to the administrators at the building level of their needs, and at the district level, or what do you think that we
Yeah,
might
I think
make sure we
this,
share?
so I think it can come in a lot of formats. I think having those conversations is definitely key. Both with department heads, building administrators, teachers, etc. I love having the qualitative data, but I'm also a big fan of doing some kind of survey or something to capture it quantitatively as well, so that when you're in front of, again, whether it's the Board of Education, whether you're just meeting with cabinet and you're discussing things, um, having those numbers and that data to back what you're saying, I think is huge. The other thing that I found, Bill, over the years, is that there are times when um, sometimes that data will show me things that I wasn't expecting to see.
Yeah.
Sorry, when working in a high school, I was even trying to
All
prep for that.
good. Hey,
Um,
here's one thing too, Mike, that a needs assessment isn't. It isn't a promise to people that you're going to do those things, is it?
Sure. No, no, this is just, hey, I'm kind of gathering a lay of the land for this year, where things are. Where I was going with that was, there are times when, I expect, say, a technology to last longer than it is. So I might look at the responses on that needs assessment and find, wow, okay, um, maybe those smart boards are going to need to be replaced sooner than I expected, because there's a lot of I don't know. I don't
Oh
want to say
yeah,
complaints, but concerns
I mean,
about them.
those things happen, don't they? You buy a product and you didn't realize that there was a major issue you had with it. Or I've had experiences where we built a new building and there was an issue with some of the sound and the wiring, and we had to get in there before we thought, especially in a new building when you get your
Sure,
product and you're like, it's going to last. So the needs assessment is vital. I put a bullet point in here about research data driven, and I want to go to the next page. I just want to kind of touch on this folks, if you're a COSIN member or if you're an ETLA district membership, that's a really, I want to just tell you that in 25, 26, you'll be a COSIN member with our membership. We're including that in there. So it's a pretty cool advantage you're going to see if you're an ETLA district member. But this particular QR code, Mike, this talks a little bit about those tech pieces that the COSIN does every year,
sure.
the hurdles, the enablers, the tech
Accelerators.
enablers, the accelerators. I don't know if you want to share a little bit about this. That's been helpful as well.
So I mean, the data comes from. It's almost fun. It's like COSIN's doing their own needs assessment. The data comes from surveying, tech leaders across the country, gathering their input on, again, what are the barriers? What are the hurdles right now to technology? What are the things that people are super excited about? I know for years and years, and I'd have to look. I'm going to be open. I haven't dug into this year's report as much as I
Yeah.
have in previous years, but cybersecurity used to be a big one on there. I'm sure that AI would be on this,
Yep.
um, but it really lays out kind of the again things that are going on, the trends that are going on in K-12. It's nice because you're getting that broad picture of the whole country, not just Ohio or not just your local area. So you're able to see kind of what other CTOs are dealing with, and it helps you start planning. If again, maybe your
Yeah,
district
I
hasn't.
think what's really so important about the having at least research based or data driven pieces that you can come back to, whether you're doing a board presentation and it's
Yep,
validating what your work is you're doing or you're proposing. And we're
sure.
going to get into some of these questions later on this afternoon about what if you don't even have a budget or someone else controls your budget. And here's some opportunities. I just wanted to give you this material if you haven't seen this resource that's out there and anyone can download it.
It's definitely worth. I mean, for anybody in the call, it's definitely worth a read through. I think a
Yeah,
lot of it's
one of the
not.
pieces is staffing, which we all know is a challenge,
Yep.
and it's one of our topics next month. But staffing is a challenge. It's one of the hurdles that all of us are facing around staffing. Um, we wanted to talk a little bit about, all right, you got a needs assessment, then it's about you've got to create and share that vision. I call this marketing 101. Some of us feel more comfortable in this space than others, but I don't know, talk a little bit about this share a vision and such that we've been leaning into, you and I, when we've been talking about this
Yeah.
piece.
So when you're thinking about building your vision for the next 3 years, really, I think one of the most important things you can do is not do it in a silo. It is fine. I'm not saying that you have to take the whole thing out to everybody, and it's fine to create that initial framework, kind of on your own, and lay out the things that that you're aware of, right? Chromebook refreshes, software purchases, things like that. It's fine to lay those out, but I think once you have that done, I know for me, what I typically do is I set up a meeting with each one of my building principals, and I'll go through the 3-year plan and say, this is kind of where I'm planning to take the district. What am I missing, especially related to your building? A good example of this came a few years back. There's a lot of conversation in our elementary about touchscreen Chromebooks. So we had not gone the touchscreen route previously. But as we were talking about device replacements, the principal said, hey, is this something that we could build in? I'd really like to see touchscreen devices K2. So we had a conversation about, do we go iPads? Do we stay Chromebooks? What does that look like? But just having, building that out collaboratively, right? That's the goal. And
Well,
there's,
what a great idea, when you're talking to your principals and sharing your 3-year vision, they can help identify for you, or you may have not witnessed the barriers in their building of something that you're thinking about doing, right?
Sure.
Or you know, other additional things that they may be a challenge or that you didn't even think about as well when you're talking about sharing that plan. So sharing that plan with administrators. Mike, do you ever share your plan with cabinet or get an opportunity to share with the board? I know you're in a role now that's different than you were in the last few years,
Sure.
and thoughts around
Uh,
that.
Typically, we do go through it in cabinet. By the time I brought it to cabinet, it's pretty well baked, and honestly, everybody in the room has kind of already seen it because we've already met. Again, I said building leaders, but I'm also talking to, our business director, people services director, um, treasurer, just making sure that kind of everybody's really on the same page. Back to a point you made earlier, Bill. Um, a lot of times the value for me in this is when they hear about a project or an idea or something you're planning to do, sometimes it uncovers things that I wasn't aware of. We talked at one time about potentially switching our visitor management system, like when you scan into the buildings. Um, and I had my own thoughts on it. But when I spoke to the high school, she really went down this road of we have this problem, this problem, and this problem. And I wasn't even aware of those. So she was happy that we were planning to potentially make a switch, but also it put on my radar, okay, hey, these are three things that if we do choose to switch, I need to keep in the back of my mind that are problematic for them. Um, so yeah, the other one that I would do, and we talked about this a couple days ago. Um, I don't think you need to do this every year, but I do think it's important to pull together a group of parents, potentially students, and run through your plan with them as well. Depending on the size of your district, ideally a parent or two from each one of your buildings, so that you make sure you're getting kind of input from all areas. Um, I find that to be super helpful as well. And if nothing more, I'm building consensus around this plan, right?
Yeah, yeah. So also, let's talk about so we aren't way up on the balcony and being unattainable. Let's talk about realistically attainable what we're talking about here today too for everybody on the call. So we walk out the door and think about, oh yeah, that's great, Mike. That's great, Bill. What we're really talking is about being reasonable, sensible about how you can get this done. I think we need to be careful that we don't sometimes bite off more than we can chew. And we take on too many projects, and we want to get change going and do all these things, but how do you do that in a way that you still got to keep the district up and running, so to speak, but
Yep.
you're trying to provide vision at the same time, and you may not have a staff that is the biggest size staff. It might be you, or it might be just you and one other person, and you're wearing a lot of hats. So I would just say take these ideas that we're talking about today and just think about them as how do they fit into your culture? How do you make baby steps? And we'll talk about that, but make this attainable.
It,
And they see you as a real value as a CTO in your district as well.
yeah, to your point, Bill, in doing one of these presentations to both the board and to a parent group, in two different instances, I had people come up to me afterwards and say, I didn't realize how much stuff that you were actually doing responsible for. And the one
Yeah,
board member was like, I'm supportive, but are you sure you can accomplish all of
yeah,
this in, this time frame? And so there's value in that too, right? They see,
there
and
is.
again, Bill and I have this conversation many, many times. Um, I don't think anybody really understands what a CTO does unless you've really sat in this chair. All the different things that you're responsible for, that you have to think about, that you have to be concerned with. Um, so there's value in that side of it too, not just sharing your plan, but really opening it up. And people are like, oh, I didn't know that you also handled access control and the cameras and wireless and the devices and AI, and I could go on and on and on. You know what I mean?
And so here's you bring out something that's a very good point, and I'm more than happy for folks to chime in here or even ask questions in the chat. But you have this ability where you get in front, and I asked my superintendent, and oh, by the way, not all superintendents do this. I went through 5 different superintendents. So there are some that were open and some that weren't. And then all of a sudden it became an opportunity for me to always do it. I asked them to allow me to talk to the PTO presidents, Mike, to your point, and do a presentation on all things tech. And there were a few people that were like, work in the tech industry or in a private sector. And you're like, how are you getting that done? And you're like, well, you're not trying to say I need more staff right out of the gate, but you're trying to help them. They become sometimes your advocates. It's
Sure.
amazing what little things can do like that. And then we had an opportunity once a year. I was able to present to the board all things technology. I wasn't directly asking for staff, but I was giving them the big picture, and they were like, "How are you getting this done?" To your point, Mike.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's I think presenting to the Board of Education is phenomenal. I actually
yeah,
really enjoy that part, because I do like to showcase the good things that we are doing,
yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
love it.
Yeah, we're gonna. I'm keeping an eye on time, and I want to pivot a little bit now. I wanna go forward to. Sorry, I want to go to this one. Stretch the IT budget. Stretch it. How do you stretch it? And we're going to get to here in a moment around real world examples and talk a little bit about what it really is about. But I mean, what if you don't have a budget or you need more budget? Mike, something I used to do and I would run around in March. It's March now, and I'd run around. I'd start going asking each principal, "What are you doing with your extra money?" Because and maybe
That
some of you
goes
else are chuckling on this call. It's use it or lose it time of the year, right? And you don't need them buying I'm not going to be, I'm getting this recorded, but I'm going to say it's stupid stuff.
sure.
Go ahead,
Uh,
Mike. What about the IT stretching the budget?
so I think there's so many different opportunities for this. I'm going to skip the first one for a second, Bill, and talk about
Sure.
external because you had mentioned PTO. Um, I think it's super valuable to take advantage of your support organizations and work with them. I'm thinking back specifically to a project I had years ago at a previous district where we wanted to do something with wireless. Wireless was kind of a new technology. It was expensive, and we didn't have the money in the budget to do everything we wanted to do. So we went to those support organizations, and there were multiple, we there were, gosh, 6 or 7 different outside organizations that helped the district, and we presented to them a plan, and they came together to help fund that plan, which was money that again was not in the general fund, but it was something that we were really passionate about, and we were able to get wireless this a long time ago. Um, but I think that's an option. I think
What I heard you say though, Mike, yeah, I heard you say you just didn't come to them and say, "Hey, I got an idea. I really like to have some money." You came with a plan so they could get behind it. And I think what's really helpful about that is, and we all probably know this on this call, that PTO, you're kind of like, great, they're funding stuff and teachers are wanting to, they're going to help teachers, they're going to buy stuff for teachers, and you're redirecting them to be on the same page as you are.
Well, one of the issues we had in that, and you got some of you may have this in your districts, was we at that district there was not a overall PTO. There was a PTO for each building, and they wanted to use the money that they raised for their building, and
Yeah.
so the conversation was around, look, this is going to impact the whole district, including your building. You're going to get access points and things like that. But in order to make this work, we kind of need everybody to chip in. And it was ended up coming out really, really well. To your point, though, I did have to present. I can also tell you about times when I've fallen flat in those presentations, where the idea was, oh,
Met with resistance, maybe,
yep,
or
I was
maybe,
gonna say a little too, innovative, a little too out there,
yeah,
and I've gone back to the drawing board too. But even in those situations, I learned, okay, this is how parents are going to receive this idea. I'm too far out here. I need to dial it back, and I need to make it something that's a little bit more, attainable.
yeah.
Um, Along those same lines, thinking external resources, another thing I always look for is local businesses that might align with what you're doing. So we put a makerspace in 8 years ago now, and we did some fundraising, but we also talked to local businesses, manufacturers, people that were in that space, um, about how we could potentially, could they put some of their products in there? Did they want to fund it? Could we have some opportunities where students could be in our space and then come and see theirs? And so partnering with local organizations or businesses, even if they're not directly in your town, maybe in a neighboring town, um, I think is another great way to kind of help stretch that budget.
Yeah, and Mike, I had struggles with that one because and we were in a good area. Don't get me wrong. However, I was just making connections when we're busy every day as leaders. How do you make connections out into the community and the business community and such? I will tell you what had come along that was very helpful, and I don't know if any of you are leveraging this, but every school district has to have a business advisory council, a BAC. I think it came about maybe 10 or 15 years ago. Maybe your district already has a business advisory council, meets once a month or once a quarter, and our superintendent facilitated that. But I got an opportunity to present in front of the business advisory council as well, and I became part of that advisory council. That was another opportunity to connect with those outside resources. I don't know, Mike, if you had that in your district or leveraged
Uh,
that, but for anyone else on the call.
I have the other thing that we have done that has worked well is you mentioned marketing 101. There are times when we'll get stories run in the local newspaper about some of the things that we want to do. And that has actually worked to have business leaders reach out to us. Say, hey, I really like this idea. We do X, Y, and Z. Do you have time for a call that we could talk some things through? So that has worked really well too.
Yeah, and just a few other, I know we've got a few budget or a few items on here about stretching it. All internal resources I referenced how, and you did too, about PTO, and I referenced about even going around to principals jokingly about this time of year, but I did. I came to them with a plan and said, look, I would like to fix XYZ in your building. I only have about $3,000. It costs five. Do you have an
Yep.
extra 2 grand? And what are you going to do with it right now? Before the end of the year. So presenting opportunities, and principals and leaders in their buildings are very open to those kind of things. When you're saying, I want to fix an issue in your building, I can't get to the full thing, but I could really get to it if you give me an extra couple thousand or whatever that need is. That helped with me in my district when I was working through it. I don't know, Mike, if you had any other things. If not, I know we
I
want to
was
talk a
I
little
was
bit about leasing.
just going to say that whole partnering with them on the solution, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? So you're also bringing money to the table, so they feel like, okay, maybe I only have 2 grand left, but Bill's going to give me another three, and together we can get $5,000 worth of whatever or this fixed. Yeah, I think that works really, really well. Um, Leasing, I put this on there because we talk about stretching it. I think in the right circumstances, leasing can be really good. One example that I love to give is if you're a newer CTO and you are struggling with device refresh. Um,
Yeah.
I think there is, again, depending on the district and what's going on, we could have a whole side conversation about this. But I think there is some value in potentially leasing machines to help get you out of a hole, maybe that a predecessor or a hole that you're in. I'm not even going to say why you're there, but I think that you get that fixed cost, which is great for your treasurer. They know every year we're going to spend X. Um, with the downside of leasing is eventually you're going to have to come out of it. So are you going to buy those machines out? What's your plan going to be? But I think leasing can be super valuable depending on the dynamic and the need.
Yeah, the situation you just described, Mike. I mean, you may walk into a district and inherit a challenge that you need to get these students devices. To this example specifically, you want to make an impact for learning while keeping that cost under control and knowing, yeah, sometimes we just got to get through these next 5 years and get this done, and this helps us get there to our next point, and then we'll move on. You're right. I mean, being flexible. I think what we're trying to say about how do you stretch this IT budget is using and looking creatively at your resources. And I once got a grant. I know grants take a lot of time, so I don't know if there's any thoughts or magic dust or pixie dust, Mike, you got about grants. I was fortunate to get one, but it did take the time writing it as well.
No, so same thing. I've been fortunate enough to get a big one or two along the way. But you're right, it does take a lot of time and energy. What I was more putting out there is there are a lot of these smaller grants available, smaller, $20,000, $30,000 that um, don't take as much effort. I mean, the downside is um, you've got to find time to do it. You know what I mean? In bigger districts, you might be lucky enough to have somebody that's sole purpose in life is helping you find grants and write grants. I don't have that, um, but if you look, there are opportunities out there. So if you're looking to, especially if you're looking to try something new, um, I think that if you look, there are some things available for you.
I will tell you that most people don't know this. I ran across it that the banking industry, it is a federal law that the banking industry has to give back so much of their profits to the community. I think it's 1 or 2%. And I can give you more information on it. I didn't bring it up today, but you see, why are these banks always supporting the 5K run or doing this or doing that? You think, well, it's part of their advertising, yes, but they also have to give back money to the local community in that area. So a bank might be another place that you can lean in and they can help you do that. They might be fully stretched, obviously giving out funds, but it's another area. But really, uh, researching a little bit of what's available for you.
One more thought on this bill that I totally we didn't talk about this the other day, but I have used this too, and it's gone really well at times. Depending on where you're at, if you have a major corporation in your general area, oftentimes their device refresh, um,
Yeah.
they a lot of times will essentially give laptops to schools or devices to schools. Um, I had a donation of about 25 laptops from a big corporation up near us that were still highly usable laptops. I was actually surprised when they dropped them off and I got the specs on them. They were, I mean, we ended up using those laptops for another 3 or 4 years in our district. And that was just me sending an email to somebody in their IT department asking if they did anything like this. And they're like, oh, yeah, we have a whole program. Fill this out and we'll let you know. So, again, another option for those people just looking
Yeah.
to stretch that budget.
No, great. I appreciate it, Mike. And again, if there's anyone on the call has questions or thoughts around these areas, put them in the chat or come off mic. We'll spend time doing that and asking and answering. I'm gonna shift back. I'm going to shift a little bit, Mike. We're going to get practical for a minute, really
Sure.
practical, and let's kind of pull it apart because uh, look, if you've been in a district and you stepped in your very first year always feels like, do I have a budget? What's my budget? If you didn't have someone that when you were being hired, that was the outgoing CTO or tech director, tell you all about the things. So it's a wild, wild west. You're trying to figure it all out. So, Mike, you and I kind of came up with some thoughts as we have experienced some of these things. What if I don't have a budget or I'm unclear of my budget? What kind of things do I really need to do? Because these are reality ones, right?
Yep,
For
100%.
folks.
So on that first one, I'm like, what if you don't have a budget or you're unclear? I think that's twofold. I think first, you do need to set up a meeting with your treasurer to just get a better understanding of how the funding works in your district. Um, but second, and this is what I constantly encourage people to do, build that plan. If you walked into your treasurer's office with a
Yeah.
comprehensive plan of where you want to go in the next 3 years, and it's realistic, you're not. Uh, I know they say shoot for the moon, reach for the stars, or is something, or shoot for the stars, reach for the moon, whatever the saying is. It needs to be realistic, right? You got to go in there. But I have found in working with a number of treasurers across a number of different districts and organizations, they really respect that. And that to me, I think is the best way to get out of that number one scenario, the no budget. Create a plan, meet with them. Once they see that you have a vision and a plan and it aligns with where the district wants to go, um, typically there's that bell. They'll work with you to get it funded.
I think it's a good one. Have you a lot of people that will come in the very first year and they're very unclear about their budget. And Mike, I can't say enough. Your treasurer really appreciates that you are coming with a budget and really articulate about what your things you need. And here's what you're doing as well. Let me just say this: most of the other people don't. We'll talk about that in a moment. But you're coming and you're showing them the need that they may have never known. What are we terrible about as technology leaders? We're terrible about tooting our own horn, and we make everything looks like pixie dust. So we think just things happen, right?
Yep.
And it just takes place. And we don't really show people what it takes to have it happen and the total cost of ownership and the infrastructure that's needed to make it successful. And a lot of times we're burning ourselves out really hard to make it all get done when we really need to tell the story, like you're talking about, Mike, coming with a clear budget, a plan, and understanding what that is.
Well,
That number
and
one.
treasurers too, they understand depreciation. They understand that, the laptops you bought 3 years ago aren't working as well now as they did. They understand inflation. So when you're saying, okay, I think the software, I'm going to need X amount for software, and I've got, a little bit of padding in here because I'm expecting prices to increase. They
Yep.
get it. They understand it. They don't.
Yeah.
I think every treasurer I've ever worked with, just coming with a plan, to your point, Bill, is key.
Yeah.
They'll
And
literally work
I
with
was in
you.
a district that you all may be in a district that principals get a budget and they just get money in their building because they do, and there's really no strings attached to theirs. And the treasurer really appreciates that we're coming and we're being very strategic about how we're using our money. What I'm telling them in the next 3 years are going to be a big ticket item that is going to blow my budget out the wall, out the that I can't even cover it. They need to know that too. So don't
Sure.
drop it on them in 6 months. But you're right. If I don't have a budget, that first year even is all about, we've talked about this in the previous slides, just sorting it all out, building a plan and starting to build that budget. Number two is a biggie, Mike. I know friends that are in districts that they started in and they may have never been a tech director before. And they walked into the door and they're the first tech director in the district as a new role. And guess who owns the budget? And this
Oh
is
yeah.
usually where it falls. Any thoughts about how do we do walk that path and
Yeah.
such?
So that one's a bit more challenging because in that one, essentially what you're trying to do is, I don't want to use the word wrestle, but kind of get control of your budget. Typically, what I recommend in that situation is same thing as number one. Let's build that plan. Um, and then meet with the business manager as you work through that plan. What I think you'll find is, especially if it's the first time CTO in the district, once people understand that you have a plan and a vision and a way to execute it, they're oftentimes willing to let you
Take
run.
it and run with it, right?
You're
Yeah.
taking, I mean, in the one sense, you're taking, I don't want to say money away from the business department, but you're also taking that responsibility away. And when you're able to show them, hey, I just like you, business manager, I have a plan for where we're going. You're thinking about repaving the bus garage. I'm thinking about replacing those clever touch boards out at the elementary. Um, once they see that you have uh, yeah, it's all about a plan. People just need to
Well,
trust
it
that
is,
you
and
know what
I
you're
would
doing.
say, too, Mike, that and folks on the call, what we're really saying is, you're building a relationship with the business manager. You're showing them that you want to make an impact for education. You can take that then to the next level and talk about having a meeting with your business manager, your treasurer, maybe your assistant soup or such, and showing how you can be more responsible and dedicated, very intentional about making sure technology has an impact for teaching and learning and the students. And that's challenging, quite frankly, for a business manager to do every day. But again, that is baby steps. That takes a little while. But you're right, Mike, coming with a plan, like you said, highly recommended.
And
But
the one thing
that
I'll
still happens today, Mike. I know there are still folks out there today that they are a technology director without a budget, if I can say it that, or the budget lies underneath the business managers or person's
So the one
area.
thing I would throw out there to anybody on this call is that, especially if you are, if you're a former teacher, and I think when I talk to new CTOs, this is one of the scariest things. Is I don't even I've never had to make a budget. I don't even know what that
Yeah,
looks like. Send myself or Bill an email.
yeah,
I'm sure that Bill and I probably have different methods, but we're both more than willing to share with you how we craft our, mine's kind of built into my 3-year plan. Um, but we're happy to share that with you just to give you a starting point on like a building block to jump off of, as you
yeah, yeah.
get off the road.
And interesting, Mike. Yesterday, I got an email from a CTO friend from another state and said, "Hey, I'm trying to figure out how I help my district understand the increasing costs of my budget." And so we talked. I actually started to put in a multiplication factor every year of about 2%, or I aligned it to what I saw the increase of the budget overall for the treasurer was for the year. If you're
That's
like any of us, we have to attend board meetings and you're hearing about the budget and the new constraints or such. And if they're so I tried to build my budget around, okay, if there's a 2% increase, I'm increasing everything of my renewal costs about 2%. So I can even help project what might cost be so that the treasurer sees that as well. So
And
yeah.
Bill, to your point, and I would just throw this out there too, because you need to know your district and you need to know what's going on. So if the conversation is, hey, maybe we're coming up on a levy cycle, or you're starting to hear conversations about kind of dialing the spending back a little bit, don't roll in there with a budget that's rolling out,
Mhm.
crazy new things. There are times when you have to say, okay, these are needs and these are wants. These are the things that we have to do, right, in order for us to keep going. Hey, I know that we really wanted to put, I don't know, clever touches in 4th grade, but now is not the time. So we're gonna take that chunk and move that out a year or two, and people are gonna have to understand just I'm being fiscally responsible, and this just doesn't fit right now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, very good. I appreciate it. I know I kind of put these in the buckets. No budget, not my budget. They bought what? This is the good one. Like maybe some of you have experienced this. What do I do about buildings or other departments that are buying hardware and software, and maybe I haven't been able to get that under control, or I stepped into the district, and that's what's happening. I had that happening in mine. I've
Yep.
got scars on my back of how I unwinded it. But Mike, what are your thoughts about this?
Yeah, this one is so full transparency. This one's probably going to be a challenge when you go to tackle this one. The problem is that you have principals, business directors, even curriculum people who have funding, and they just buy things because no one's ever kind of prevented them from it. And what happens is they buy things that don't necessarily align with what you're doing or that really work with your systems. Um, we're not a big iPad district here in Chagrin. Um, but there was, when iPads came out, there was a big, well, we're going to get these. I'm like, well, time out.
Yeah,
Uh,
there was the iPad craze, wasn't there? Yeah.
there was. So I think what you have to do is uh, ideally, you got to leverage relationships here. You need to
Mhm.
build a relationship with all of those people. And I would not start by going to your treasurer and saying, um, don't allow these things to happen. I would start with a conversation with each one of those people that says, hey, I'm here to support you. Let's make sure you're buying the best possible technology for whatever it is. Um, are people still going to go rogue at times and buy things? Yes, that's going to happen. Ultimately, what happened here in Chagrin was now all of those things go through me. But that was a process, Bill. I mean, it took
Oh
year.
yeah, and you're right, Mike. We're trying to build relationships and trust, and I think we will end up this session today talking about those two big ideas: as walk out the door, you're building trust with people and building relationships. And I did institute a hardware software approval form eventually. It took a while to get there.
Yep.
Uh, but even after years of building that trust and then introducing the form, we have new people that come in. You get a new principal to come in, or you get a new assistant soup, and they came from a district that it was whatever goes I can do. And I'm gonna buy an iMac for myself because I have money in my budget. And you were like, we don't do any of those here. Well, I had one in my last district on my desk, and I'm gonna have one here, if you know what I mean. And
Yep.
so
That's
I always ask, just like you, Mike, I would ask the essential question: what are you trying to accomplish? And put it back on them to help them articulate to us, what is it you want? You got money, I get it. How can I help you spend it, to lay your point, Mike, so we get the most bang for the buck and it aligns and complements our larger vision?
Yeah,
That's
it's
how.
that one. I laugh. That one, I feel like that happens almost every time we get a new administrator. You know,
Yes, it
oh,
does.
my district used to do this, or I used to do that, and it's
Yeah.
again, I'm not saying that I'm not telling you no that you can't spend that money. What I'm telling you is let's collaborate and do this together so you get something that we can support that's going to solve whatever problem you're trying to uh, address. And I mean, Bill, I will say though, I am pretty hard no on Macs. Not that I don't like Macs, but we're a Chrome district. I have some Windows devices. Trying to support
Well, I think you all know on the call, and Mike, we're always looking at total cost of ownership and return on investment and efficiencies and infrastructure, and trying to complement the infrastructure that's in place today. So I think this number three is a really important one for us to lean in, especially we just hit on this idea of new employees, wherever they came from, especially if they're an administrator and they've got access to their budget and they want to buy things. It is about helping them understand what our infrastructure is. I would say to you that getting even farther up the pecking order and getting your superintendent to see the big picture as well. So when there's an onboarding of new employees, you kind of lay out the land of what we are here already, and they're hearing the message as well. So
Yep.
little things, but they take a while. Um, Along the same lines, a little bit is number four here, a question we have, and I know we're doing okay on time. We have a few minutes. How do we rein in this miscellaneous spending across the district? I mean, Mike, I've always looked at my district and said, we have opportunity upon opportunity because we're very blessed. However, the miscellaneous spending of random things, and you're trying to rein some of that in and focus it on a plan that you have.
Yeah, I think for us, the miscellaneous really, for at least here, revolves a lot around software. So we began to use different tools to help us see how much people really accessing that software. I don't, no offense, vendors, I don't trust the vendor metrics because they want you to believe that oh, you got all your teachers are logging in and yada yada yada. I want to run my own tools and see that, and so that's a hard conversation, especially coming out of COVID. Right? Remember in COVID, it felt like we would buy essentially anything that people felt like they needed to run their class remotely, et cetera. And what we ended up having was a number of packages or applications that were used by 30 to 40% of the district, but you
Yeah.
were paying for everybody
Right.
to use it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we had to start having those conversations of, okay, what do we need? And what is nice, but it's just, not
Nice
essential.
to have, right? Needs and wants. You talked about it earlier, Mike. Needs and wants. A couple comments in the chat, David. Thank you for sharing a little bit about you having a Google form. And I love your question. He talks about they have a Google form about requests. Please explain how this will be used to improve or enhance the educational experience at your school district. Trying to get people's mindset to say, I remember the iPads. Just I want one because I want one. That's what my special ed folks told me. I want one because I want one. And then the principals wanted one. And I said, what is it you're trying to accomplish? Along the same lines as your question, David, of how is it going to improve? And actually, when we did grants, when I set aside a little, we didn't talk about this, but I tried to set aside about $1,000 or $2,000 every year in my budget to give grants for a certain new pilot we wanted to kind of step into. And I would ask teachers if they wanted to get involved in this. They had to tell us that you just weren't getting the money. You had to explain how you're going to use this tool and improve technology and how you would help us learn how to better implement it. So, great point. Wes has a question, Mike, too. Big
Real
challenge that we all have is when you do these large bulk purchases, right? And then you're like, that thing's just hanging out there in the next 3 years or 2 years or next year, all these are going to come up for replacement. How do you spread it out? I've got some ideas because we went 1-to-1, um,
And
five,
I can
12.
jump in on that, Bill,
quick.
Oh yeah,
too.
go for it, Wes.
Give me
Thanks.
one sec, Wes. I have to go.
Oh,
I let
Yeah.
Bill know I've got
Mike,
something that
you
I have
did. I apologize on that. Yeah,
I stayed 2 minutes longer than I should have. Thank you, everybody. Bill, thank you for having me.
you
It's
bet. We're
super
running
fun.
last minute.
We could talk all day about this. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to talk about anything,
Yeah, and
everything.
I've got a slide here too, Mike, at the end here, just a little bit. People can
Oh,
see your email address is at the bottom, sharing it with folks. So thank you, Mike. I know you have an item you have to address as an assistant superintendent you told me about. It
I
came up,
do.
so thank you.
So I'm going
All
to go
right,
do that. But
we'll
thank you.
let you go.
Thanks.
Wes, why don't you jump in and share a little bit about that, please?
so that was one of the challenges I had when I got to my current district, right? We
Yeah.
had been lucky enough to refresh devices at certain times, but when you're talking about planning, right, you start looking at COVID money bought all new Chromebooks in a lot of places, or we got all new staff devices and stuff, and then trying to articulate that back as you try to plan and build your bigger plan of, well, in 5 years or whatever, you're not gonna want me to come back to you and say, oh, we need to buy 3,000 devices all at once, right?
Mhm. Yeah. So we had that a little bit of a challenge. We had kind of that bubble, and so what I tried to do is flatten that bubble out. And I didn't know, it may not have been the best solution, but I looked at how do I reallocate and jump in and start to do this in small chunks. So I took off and I said, all right, we're going to take, and every year we're going to look at a ninth or 10th or 11th, 12th grade. What are we replacing? When are we replacing it? And who doesn't need to be replaced on the same cycle? Maybe our fifth and sixth and seventh and eighth grade devices can go longer. They can go maybe 4 years or 6 years or 5 years, where our 9, 10, and 11 devices or 12 devices can go every 3 years. So we came where we had a bulk, like you're talking about, Wes, and I started to flatten out. And what we did then is we took when the 11th and 12th grade devices or 10, 9, 10, 11, 12th grade devices were maybe only 3 years. After that third year, we would reallocate them down to the lower levels. So to strengthen, to extend whatever they had, and then allow them to give us a little bit of a breather of a couple years before we actually leaned in and replaced those years. So again, don't know if anyone else has an example that they've used, but specifically that one, Wes, we tried to level that out because it is a real thing that people
Yeah,
are having. You
and
got
that's what we're trying to do, but it's hard when you come in and you got a bunch of them,
oh
right?
yeah, it's very hard, and it's tracking devices. It's a wild west of making sure that they have enough and that those devices are still working well. And then it's about being creative, like we talked earlier about leveraging some of your resources, maybe even in a PTO in a building, and say, hey, we really could use your help on funding about 50 devices, or can we do this together? Very creative thinking on how to level that replacement cycle out evenly, so you don't have big ones going on every 5 years. No, this is good. A couple of things that Mike and I talked about. Just we've been opening questions and talking a little bit about this, but I wanted to give you, as we're right at the top of the hour, Mike shared with me about, and we were talking about trust and building relationships are huge. And we wanted to just be encouraging to folks on the call today as well, that it is the long game. You're going to be in your district. You're going to have people that come and go, and you stay, and you're trying to build relationships with people. And it is this long game of getting you into what I used to call a well-oiled machine. trying to get your district into a place where it's a well-oiled machine so you can forecast and spend time being a visionary on things rather than be so tactical in the weeds on the other pieces. So again, I put this last slide for you in there. Thank you very much for attending. Next month in April, we're doing another version of Diary of a CTO. Sean Whelan from Garfield Heights City School and I are going to talk about internal versus external staffing. And we're going to talk a lot about staffing and what does it look like? And what if you don't have the staff? How do you get there? We're also going to, like I said, lean into internal versus external. More than welcome to take any comments or questions. I'm going to stay on. We'll stop our recording, but you're welcome to leave. You can get a hold of Mike or myself with the email addresses at the bottom. But I really appreciate you being on the call, and thank you for the few that gave us some questions and came off. You have a great rest of the week, but I'll be here and just hanging out for a few minutes as you jump out.